All right, Paul here with Chris and Chuck and Lyle and myself. Welcome to Catfish Weekly Series 6. And today we're going to go over baits, the best baits for catfish. Probably cover things that you didn't even know, but we're going to go over the baits. Anybody want to start off first? Or
Lyle or Chuck?
Yeah, I can go over some. Down here, we use a lot of bluegill for blues and flatheads. Most time we try to get them the day of. There's not much care to take in a bluegill. They'll pretty much live through anything. You can keep them overnight in a bucket. I use a small Fraybill bubbler, and I just stick down there battery operated. Not go fishing for 2 days, and I'll still have them lively and ready to go if you keep the water, if it's real hot, just keep ice in it or whatever. But that seems to be the best bait down here. We try, in this river, skipjack get natural. I've soaked skipjack straight up next to bluegill. Some nights I hadn't got a bite on skipjack, and bluegills just tear them up. So a lot of people say skipjack does really good in bodies of water that they're not natural to, but I don't really find that true here in the Coosa. Cut carp seems to work a lot better. But the days that we go fishing, we go ahead and try to get our baits that day. So we'll go out and we'll do a whole different little fishing trip. We won't even have our catfish stuff with us. I'm right here on the lake. We'll jump in the boat. We'll go get our bluegill. I'll bring the net with us in case we're not able to get the bluegill. We have to use rod and reel here for our bluegill. We can't use a throw net. We can't hardly use any other species of game-type fish other than bluegill. So we'll have to go out and we'll have to do our little brim fishing trip, catch our bluegill on rod and reel, come back in. If we don't get our bluegill, we'll have to throw the net a couple of times, which shad's usually pretty easy to get. The larger ones that are 10 inches long or sometimes longer, they're a lot harder to get. But a lot of times it's the last resort. But we usually always have live bait when we go out flathead fishing at night. And anything that's left over from our flathead trip, we go ahead and put them in Ziploc bag, freeze them up, have our last resort, go out blue fishing or whatever. When I go out catching shad, the best secret that I've learned to keep them alive and keep them lively is to have a round bait tank and a round transfer tank. By a transfer tank, what I mean is the intermediate storage to put them in that you dump the net in when you pull them out of the water. That transfer tank, they can go ahead and regurgitate, get rid of waste, get rid of some of the slime coat and stuff that causes the toxins in the water.
okay, try again, Chuck.
Where did I lose the bait tank?
Yeah, just there about the round and transfer you started chopping up.
Okay. On the round transfer tanks, you'll dump your throw net straight into the transfer tank. You'll go ahead and let them regurgitate, get rid of their waste, get some of their slime. All them toxins will get in that transfer tank. Then, after about 20 minutes, you can take them out of the transfer tank, put them in your bait tank. After you've got your aerator going, all this, and they'll live, and they're a lot more lively than if you dump them straight in your bait tank. A round bait tank helps a lot because the shad, they want to gather in the corner. And by them gathering in the corner, they're bumping their noses against it, and they're taking each other's oxygen away. If you can get a round bait tank and put your water in a circular motion, That helps the shad swim around. They don't have no corner to get in and group up. And most of the time they'll last. If you can keep the water at a pretty cool temperature, they can last about all night, and they're still lively when you put them on the hook. Another thing I do, if I have to resort for shad, if I cannot get the bluegills we need, or small size carp, which we'll catch on dough baits or get them in the net, I'll use the smaller shad, and I'll put 2 on a hook. I will hook them behind the dorsal fin, where they're facing away from each other. And what this does, it causes a larger bait presentation for viewing, and it causes a larger bait presentation with vibration, which the larger fish that are targeting those vibrations of that size, it brings them on in. You'll still get the small 3, 4, 5, 10-pound flatheads coming in, but it will also target the larger ones on in if you can't get the larger baits. And also, if we're using bluegill, and a lot of times during prime time we'll get out, immediately wham wham, we have 4 big hand-sized bluegill. That's all we were able to get, and they're gone. And we have 12 or 15 small ones. I'll do the same thing with the small bluegills. I'll put them on there facing away from each other, hook behind the dorsal fins, and they'll just sit there and play tug of war. They won't get down there on the bottom and get inactive and try to hide. I think what they do, they keep each other on their toes. They each know each other's there, and it keeps both of them active the whole time. And last year we did this a lot, and it helped big time on bringing in the flatheads we were trying to target. And a lot of times we didn't have problems catching blues right along with them.
I'll jump in here real quick, Chuck.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we should mention that is that for bluegill, there's many different types. Some people call about every kind of sort of sunfish or bluegill a bluegill, and your state probably doesn't do that. They probably have a limit on different species, so like a pumpkin seed or green sunfish or bluegill. Each of them might have a different limit in your state, so you should always check your state laws to see what you're allowed to have. Also with live bait, if you're allowed to take any sort of live bait from one body to the other. Like in Indiana, I know you're not allowed to take shad. I'm not allowed to go to my reservoir and cast net shad, keep them alive, and take them to any other lake or even to the Ohio River. It's illegal to transport the live shad. You have to pretty much kill them, throw them on ice immediately. So just know your laws, look up your laws, make sure that if you're out there catching bluegills live and throwing them in a bucket, that you're not, make sure you know what species you got, what your limits are. Because if a DNR guy comes up, most of the time around here, they look in your bucket and they will count and see what you're at. And I don't want anybody getting tickets out there. So just make sure you know your laws.
Absolutely. And this is this week's code. It kind of gets back. There you go. Can you see it all? Yeah. So this is this week's code for the giveaway. Anything you want to go and add there, Lyle?
Well, we use a lot of bluegill and bullheads or flatheads, but when we are tournament fishing, the majority of the time we're using skipjack, moon eye, shad, freshest caught as you can get. Personally, I know that this will start a big hoo-ha with everybody talking about fresh over frozen, but our success rate is probably better on frozen bait than it is fresh bait. I can't tell you why. Just sometimes they like it, and sometimes they don't. But usually fresh is probably better than frozen. But we keep frozen skipjack, frozen shad in our area. The Asian carp has got so predominant that they've moved a lot of the shad out. that also makes good cut bait. We catch them babies and they jump in the boat, side them off, and put them in a bag with all the juice and blood and stuff, and vacuum seal them up and keep them that way. And the same we do vacuum seal the skipjack and shad whole. I've caught the most fish on frozen bait, and that's simply because a lot of times running tournaments, we don't have time to go out and get fresh bait. We use it if we got it. I have a pond behind my house that has nothing in it but bluegill and small bass, and when I catch the bass, I throw them up on the bank because I don't want them in there. If we're going after flatheads, we just go down there and rip us out a couple of dozen bluegill or sun perch or something, and we're good to go. In tournament situations, sometimes a guy, if he's in a channel cat area and nobody's catching any fish, ought to have some kind of D&K punch bait, something like that in the boat. If you're not getting in some fish and you need to, a lot of the tournaments will have a deal to where the big prize will be one fish over a certain length will get you in a drawing, and at that point, if you're halfway through the day and you don't have anything in the boat, you need to put some fish in the boat, and you can use fishing worms or stink bait of some kind of your choice, whatever works good for you, and get your fish in the boat so you get in a drawing. Sometimes people are giving away boats, sometimes they're giving away rods, sometimes they're giving away different prizes, different things, but you have to have a fish to qualify, and you can usually go to the rocks or the brushy areas and off the end of dikes and stuff and pick you up a fish right quick to get you in a drawing for things. When the water's flooded and it gets up in these farming fields in our area, the catfish go up in these areas and they'll be eating worms and night crawlers and stuff that come out of that soil, and when it starts draining out, they're already accustomed to going up in there after that stuff, and you can take your big old circle hook and load it up with bait, night crawlers or something. The best is if you get something from that area, but if not, get you some night crawlers and just keep putting them on that hook until it's just a big old ball of them. And where it's draining out, toss your anchor above it, toss right down into that, and let it drift right down below it. A lot of times you'll pick up a big old blue because they've been up in there chasing that food source. And as far as I know, that's the very best time to use them, unless you're in a channel cat tournament where they will work really well. But we keep, when we go out, we try to get an assortment of different things, because one day they'll like skipjack, the next day they may want shad, the next day they may want something different. And if you're in a tournament situation especially, you need to have an abundant source of different things and cut it differently. Sometimes the presentation makes all the difference in the world, and how fish will react to bait, and try different rigs. You know, 2 hooks in a big piece of bait, or cut the sides off and use strips one time, use chunks the next time. Sometimes they only want the heads. You just got to search around and try to find what's working, and once you figure out what they're wanting, then just keep feeding it to them.
Yeah, and I'd tell you right now that this last year, a lot of people think you go down to a tournament on the Ohio River, and everybody in the tournament heads down the river, and they've got skipjack and shad and carp and all this bait on, and they're out there trying to catch, a blue. And I got to the point, and if I would have done it sooner, I probably would have done better. I ended up 4th place in this tournament because I did all that stuff as well. And I used skipjack that I had frozen. I used some shad that I had fresh and frozen. I just couldn't get on any fish. I finally went up into the shallows, ended up throwing night crawlers. I even brought night crawlers with me up into the shallows in one of the tributaries that go down into the Ohio River, and got into some real shallow water and limited out on channel cats and ended up in 4th place. And if I'd have done it a little bit sooner, I probably would have had a little nicer turn in, and would have ended up placing in the money, on just channel cats. So even worms on any given tournament, you want to have abundance of bait, like Lyle said.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind right off the bat is a few years ago, Keith Atkins and I was at the time living in Springfield, and I drove up there and spent 3 or 4 days pre-fishing before one of the bigger tournaments at that time was the Cook's Boat and Motor Tournament. And we had been laying out big, nice blues every day right in front of the dam at Clarksville, and I just, I had a spot that I knew he was going to go to and do good, and we sat there for 4.5 hours and never got a bite. And Keith looked at me and he said, "We got to get fishing the boat. We can't get in the drawing without it." And we went over behind the island on a bunch of chunk rock and got our limit of 5 channel cats that day. The fishing was really bad. It had turned off on a cold front, and there was 107 boats in that tournament. We ended up getting 14th with a limit of 5 channel cat on Danny King Country. And if we hadn't have took off when we did, we probably wouldn't have been able to turn the fish in.
Yeah. Some other baits that I could think of is, I don't think anybody's mentioned creek chubs. Around here locally, we go out to our creeks. We can find what we call creek chubs or suckers. Chubs, suckers, they're good bait for all 3 species of fish: channel, flat, and blues. Either cut or live. I mean, you can get some pretty decent. You can get some, 3-inch chubs all the way up to friggin' 12-inch chubs or suckers. I mean, or bigger even, 16-inch. I mean, they can get pretty good size. It's a real good bait for, like I said, all the above. I can go to a lake and use a chub for channel cats or flatheads. I can go to the river, use it for any one of the 3 species, and it's a really good bait as well.
Bullheads.
Bullheads.
Bullheads is an excellent flathead bait. If they get very big, I usually try to take a set of skinning pliers, which I use them for cutting off the horns off of the bullhead. They won't stop a big flathead from taking them. They'll take them horns and all, but the smaller ones sometimes they won't take them. The 5, 6, 7 pound flathead. I just clip them off. I also use them to take that nasty old skipjack off my hooks when I'm done for the day too. But bullhead's one of the great flathead baits because them babies are so aggressive, and them bullheads they're like bluegill. They stay alive a long time, and you can keep them really well.
Yeah, I keep a little set of shears, and if I ever catch bullheads in my little creek things, I keep them as well, and I do the same thing. I take these little scissor shears that I got, and I clip off both their side fins and their dorsal top fin there, the sharp ones that'll sting you. I clip all those off, and those things, a bullhead stay alive forever. I mean, I've taken a bullhead down to the Ohio River, threw it out 10 different times as I was fishing for flatheads, didn't catch anything, threw him back in my bait tank, brought him back home, put him in my bait tank at home, took him out again with me 2 months later at the river. I mean, they just stay alive forever. So they're a real good bait to have if you can get them.
Not to mention about carp, though. You use all species of carp, but I'm losing my voice. But one thing you want to make sure is if you got an Asian carp in your boat, kill it and take it with you. You get caught with a live Asian in Illinois or Missouri, it's your butt. It's
an instant ticket.
Not to mention it's an invasive species anyway, and it's a good catfish bait.
Guaranteed ticket.
One thing that I've noticed about Asian carp, and you may get some argument about this also, for me personally, the hotter the water temperature is, the better it works. I don't have very good success rate on it when the water is cold, but in the summer, the hotter it gets, the better it works for me. And we've caught some really nice blue cat on those, and a few flatheads, actually, not as many though. I don't catch very many flatheads on cut bait, although this year I caught the majority of them on cut bait. But normally, live bait is what works best for me for flatheads.
Just trying to name a few other baits. People use livers. Liver's a bait for liver and shrimp, and the shrimp, I've heard people that they baste it in garlic and all kinds of other different concoctions, and it's a good channel cat bait normally for small lakes and things like that. Beef or pork hearts I've been used. They're a good bloody bait that's easily to be able to chunk up and take out to river or lake and use.
The beef and pork livers is pretty good too. I've used those on channel cat.
Hot dogs.
Along with crawfish, and I lived one time in Missouri, and I can't remember, but I think we could use goldfish. I can't remember, but
Yes, yes. A lot of people use goldfish, especially for flatheads. They work really well.
you use chicken gizzards. You can't get them off a hook.
Yeah,
Well, that's another thing about Asian carp. The skin on them is so tough that, you know, if you're having problems keeping a bait on, Asian carp is an excellent choice at heavy current because you nearly got to cut it off. That's the reason for the skinning pliers in our boat is because it is so tough that it's a job to get it off. You actually have to nearly cut it off with any hook. It's just the toughest stuff there is.
And going back to what Chuck said, you know, if you're out throwing your cast net for shad or whatnot, and you get a common carp, you know, a grass carp or whatever in your net, especially a smaller one. My biggest fish of the year this year was caught on the head of a small grass carp or common carp. So it's a good bait as well. You know, I mean, if you get one of them in your net and you're throwing for shad, don't toss it back out. You know, if you have a good mixture of bait on your boat, that's the best way to try to find what the fish are looking for. And you know, myself personally, as far as the way I use bait, I don't seem to use tails very often. I've a lot of people I know don't, but I've heard there are people that love tails. Myself personally, I'll either just, you know, cut the tail off and throw it out, or cut it and put the whole thing on. I'll like just slice on the side of the bait, and if I'm baiting the thing whole, I'll just leave the whole thing on. But if I'm using any sort of cut bait or whatever, I normally cut the tail off and don't use it.
I got another little list here. Stink baits, and some people believe in them, some don't. I've never caught anything but a small fish off of stink bait, but that's just me. I have used catfish soap on the Missouri River in Columbia, Missouri when I lived there. That works. Cottonseed cake. Me and my dad would go out, and that's all he'll bring, and he still catches catfish. And then you got bait enhancers. You want to be kind of careful about what you get. You know, the other thing you didn't talk about was lures. They sometimes catch flathead. I seen a lot of people the other day talking about jigging for flatheads.
Yeah, I myself, I don't do it. I'm not sure if anybody that I know of that even really, you know, especially in a tournament setting, I don't know of anybody that does it really, but there could be some. I myself don't.
And I do know, after several uses from Rusty's shad products at Walmart, they are absolutely worthless. We've baited up 15 jugs, 15 regular shad. We've done it with trout lines, and every time the bait's pretty well still on the hook. So once in a while you might get a turtle, but
yeah. Now I do want to mention when you're doing that with jugs and stuff, you're doing that as a test mode. You don't do that for fishing. You're doing that just to test a bait, and then all the fish still get turned loose. I want to make sure that everybody understands what the reason for that.
Because you got one pole or two poles, you're not going to get a very accurate number. So that's the reason we do that when we're testing.
You can release all the fish.
Yeah, we did that with Triple X and 15 jugs with, 15 without. So when we're testing baits, I get a better number or a better average.
I think that I have tried every bait enhancement product that's on the market. I get people sending me that stuff all the time, and I'm not saying you can't catch stuff on it. I'm just saying it's never worked for me, any brand. I've tried it all. I've tried it just fun fishing, pre-fishing for tournaments. I've tried it in tournaments when the fishing was slow. And if the fish are biting, they'll take the natural stuff every time before they take the other stuff.
They never work for us in the cold. It's always got to be 70 and above.
I'd like to, real quick here, I'd like to talk about a couple utensils couple things that people can use to help with catching bait. The first is a product called the Perfect Circle Net Thrower. I myself, I'll be honest with you, I can throw a net maybe 2 times, 3 times, and get it to open about 80% if I'm lucky. And then after that, I just start to slack off on it or something because it just starts to get worse and worse as I throw it. I know a lot of people that have used this and that believe in it, so it's something that I'm pretty confident in recommending to get. Here's what it looks like. It's basically just a utensil that goes inside of your cast net. I heard that it's a bit of a pain to install. Takes 2 people, but it's like a frisbee. You throw the net almost like a frisbee. It opens perfectly every time. It's going to give you your maximum opening and catch the most bait fish in it as possible. And it works for up to 4 to 8 foot radius cast nets. You can find those at like BassPro.com or Cabela's.com. Like I said, that's something that I'd recommend if you have a hard time throwing a cast net or you're learning. You know, I believe it's $29.99. Besides that, the other thing going along with what Chuck was saying again, shad tanks. In order to keep shad alive, you have to have a round tank. They won't live in any square cornered tank whatsoever. Keep Alive makes a really good bait tank. And it goes along with other fish as well, not just shad. It helps. A round tank helps with most types of bait fish, but especially for shad, keeping them alive. And Dave over at BottomDwellersTackle.com, I'm gonna go ahead and do a screen share, and I'll show you guys some of these bait tanks. And see, you got right here. You got the Keep Alive. They start at around $224.95 for a 30-gallon with shipping. That's shipping included. And they go on up. They've got, you know, glow-in-the-dark type tanks. You know, blue interior tanks, smaller tanks, tanks with different options. You know, there's lots of things here. But these things, the reason why they're so expensive is because of the insulation that's in them, and then also because of the filter that they come with. So they're a really good product. They've been recommended by a lot of people, a lot of pros and things that want to use live shad. They're going to keep a bait tank either exactly like that from Keep Alive or a similar product on their boat. And if you don't know, Dave has the best prices on anything anyway, so if you're looking at getting one, you might as well check them out over there.
See, got anything else?
I was wanting to go over these guys that go out and do their bow fishing. You'll see them go through at night while you're fishing. They got the whole lake lit up with these big decks on the front. If you see these guys at boat launches, you can ask them for their number or give them your number. Tell them when they come in the morning.
You might want to let them know what you're doing first. You start asking guys for numbers at the boat ramp. It might not go the way you want it.
Yeah, and you can also let them know a lot of these guys aren't educated about flatheads and stuff, and they'll get out there and they'll shoot flatheads and stuff while they're back up in their, you know, you just let them, give them your opinion, just like, hey guys, you know, pass on my flatheads while you're back there. There's plenty more fish out there. There's a bunch of junk fish. I looked through this guy's barrel one day, and you know, he probably had 10 or 15 flatheads in there that he shot back up in sloughs. So that'd be a good way to get the message out about sparing your flatheads and your blues and stuff that they may run up on also. And you can get these big carp and stuff and just bring them home, freeze them whole. It keeps all the bloods, oils, and scents up in them really well while they're froze. You can take them out, spur of the moment, be on the river in a few minutes, and you got instant bait, and they usually do, you know, really well. And you don't have to work at all to get it. Just, you know, just get in touch with these guys, tell them you need 3 or 4 when they go out, and it's a done deal.
On that same line, Chuck, you could go on your skippy trips, and if you're having trouble getting skipjack, there's there's always some local guys down there that are just catching them and throw them up on the bank. And most of them guys will be really glad just to let you have the fish they catch because they're doing it for fun. They're not doing it to keep them, and they just throw them on the bank, and they'll give you all kinds of fish, and you can get your limit that way. And don't forget that there is new limit restrictions in a lot of places this year on bait.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, before we close, anybody got anything else?
I know there's a lot of baits that we didn't cover. There's other stuff out there. There's goldfish. There's lots of things that can be used that we didn't get a chance to touch on. We may or may not touch on it in the future, but if you have any specific questions or anything, feel free to post them on our Facebook, and we can try to get to them at some other show or something like that. And we're more than willing to help you out and pass on any information or knowledge that we know.
Yippers. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close for tonight. I'm really losing my voice now, so we'll talk at y'all later, and keep them lines tight.